everyone, welcome back to another Tuesday Talks video. I'm Ariana, aka the wellness student, and today I thought we would talk about a topic that I'm really interested in. Fun fact, I'm actually starting my new job in this department or field of nutrition just this week, so that's really exciting. So I thought we would have a little chat about it. Today we will be discussing about food allergies. And as always, what I'll do is I'll pop the timestamps below if you want to skip to any section, and I'll also provide a summary on Instagram if you can't watch the full video. Today we'll be talking about what food allergies are, what they can lead to, what are the causes of food allergies, testing, treatment and prevention. But I'm going to stop babbling here and we'll get straight on to it. So firstly, what are food allergies? To basically sum up a food allergy, it's an overreaction of the immune system to proteins in certain foods that you consume. The body basically perceives the food as a threat, and then that causes a reaction within the body. Generally 2% of adults suffer with food allergies, whilst 7% of children suffer with food allergies in the UK. When we think about food allergens, we have the big 8 food allergens, and they are milk, eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, shellfish, soy and wheat. There's actually an additional 6 as well that need to be put on food labels, just as the big 8, and those are celery, lupin, mollusks, sulfites and sesame. However, in saying that, anyone can be allergic to any type of food. It's completely dependent on how that individual responds to different types of foods. And when someone does have a food allergy, it can be extremely dangerous. So we have 2 kind of ends to the spectrum. An allergic reaction can be quite mild to moderate, so you get tingling and maybe some hives. But when food allergies are quite serious, it can result in swelling of the face, throat and mouth, and that's called angioedema, difficulty swallowing, breathing, wheezing, feeling dizzy, and this can potentially lead to loss of consciousness. And those more serious reactions, the constriction of the airways, can't breathe, that's what we call anaphylaxis. And anaphylaxis, in short, is basically mediators in the body being released, which causes the contraction of smooth muscles. So for example, your throat becomes quite tight, your capillaries dilate, which means that your blood flows into those spaces, subsequently causing a rapid drop in blood pressure. Then you might get dizziness, loss of consciousness. Essentially, the body goes into shock mode. Ultimately, this can lead to death if not treated pretty rapidly. A food allergy is an IgE mediated reaction in the body, and what IgE is an antibody. It's called immunoglobulin E. And we also call IgE mediated food allergy type 1 hypersensitivity, and this type of hypersensitivity is mainly associated with those symptoms that you get in food allergy reactions. There is also something that we call oral allergy syndrome or pollen food syndrome. Basically, it means if someone's allergic to pollen and they eat mainly fresh fruits and vegetables, raw fruits and vegetables, then they can get some symptoms such as tingling, itching, hives. And to reduce this, cooking is advised because it can reduce the pollen count in the food, which helps to kind of alleviate those symptoms. Secondly, let's talk about what food allergy can lead to. So we discussed a little bit about the reactions that can take place, the symptoms that present themselves when you have a food allergy. But what happens in the body when this actually happens? Food allergy reaction is a rapid hypersensitive reaction in sensitized individuals involving IgE and mast cells following the exposure of an antigen. And I'm going to summarize this really simplistically. Your immune system has the ability to respond to foreign invaders, in that it produces antibodies upon its first entrance into the body to be able to neutralize that foreign material. So when that foreign material comes in again, the body knows how to respond, kills a pathogen, virus, whatever it is, so that there's no harmful effects on the body. But what happens in food allergies is that food is perceived as a threat, and those antibodies are produced against those certain types of foods or the proteins in the foods. And this occurs over a 2-stage process. So firstly, we get sensitization, where the food is eaten for the first time, the protein in the food is sampled by the gut, and antigen presenting cells will appear on the surface and start producing IgE antibodies against that certain protein. And these are highly specific and have a high affinity for that specific protein. The first stage, it causes no physical symptoms, and then you get the reaction upon secondary exposure. IgE antibodies recognize the protein and bind to it. That binding of IgE to the protein stimulates mast cells, which release histamine into the surrounding tissues. And histamine is responsible for that inflammation, that itchiness, those hives, and then those more serious symptoms. And actually, in some cases, you can even react to different foods and not been through that sensitization process. So we call this cross-linking, where certain foods share the same proteins. Maybe a person has been already sensitized to that protein, and then eating a different food has caused that reaction. I actually learned a fun fact yesterday, researching this actually. 50% of those who suffer with latex allergies are more likely to develop food allergies against avocados, strawberries, bananas, just because of that cross-linking of proteins. This also explains why if an individual is allergic maybe to peanuts, they might be allergic to other nuts as well. The frequency of food allergies has massively increased over the past 30 years. There's been a 5-fold increase in peanut allergies in the UK, and that just makes you think, why is that happening? Why are we becoming more allergic? That brings us nicely on to the next section, which is what are the causes of food allergies? Pretty similar to most diseases, we have environmental and also biological causes. And let's start off with the biological causes first. Food allergies can result massively from genetic predispositions. I can never say that word, predispositions. And this is demonstrated by twin studies, which have indicated that food allergies are 80% heritable. In addition, if both your parents suffer from food allergies, you are at a 75% increased risk of developing those food allergies. And then if one parent suffers with a food allergy, then you are 50% more likely to suffer from that food allergy as well. There have been massive genome-wide studies trying to determine what genes are associated with food allergies, and they're basically ongoing. There's been some identification, but yeah, it's basically just a growing body of research really. Secondly, it's very dependent on how much IgE your body makes. So if you make more, then you're more likely to be hypersensitive to some foods. It's very individualized, depending on the person and how much their body produces. There's also been a lot of research in the gut bacteria and how this relates to food allergy. Results of my studies have actually demonstrated that dysbiosis, so that imbalance of healthy and bad bacteria, can play a role in tolerance and immune system development when it comes to food allergy. And this has also been indicated in humans as well. There's also additional factors. Another one is when you're pregnant, there's a shift in hormones, and actually that can cause you to be more allergic to certain foods. There's loads of biological reasons, but those are kind of the main ones that we associate with food allergies. And when we think about the environment, we have so many factors that can play a role in food allergy development. And just relating back to gut bacteria, we have a hypothesis called the hygiene hypothesis, meaning that if you are exposed to many different environmental factors, that will actually expose your microbiome, so your gut bacteria, to many different things, helping to promote a more diverse microbiome, which can help aid your immune system. So in essence, factors such as owning a pet, having more siblings, growing up in the countryside opposed to maybe urbanized areas, and basically growing up kind of in the dirt, I suppose, that can actually help your oral tolerance to foods. And that's because it helps to develop your immune system a bit more. If you're in a very clean environment, you aren't exposed to as much, meaning that your diversity of your microbiome is reduced, and it doesn't really help in developing the immune system as much. And also what happens in the very early life stages, so factors such as natural birth versus cesarean, breastfeeding, weaning, these are all factors that can come into food allergy development. So science suggests that fetuses are born sterile, so there's no kind of gut microbiome. They have a very immature immune system. And when a baby is born via natural delivery, there is actually bacteria in the vaginal canal. And what happens in a natural birth is when the baby travels through the vaginal canal, this can actually help to promote a healthy colonization of microbes within the baby, within the gut, thus helping to improve the immune system. When babies are born C-section, they don't get that exposure. So babies born via C-section have actually been linked to an increased risk of allergic diseases. And when it comes to breastfeeding, Breast milk contains bacteria and also sugars that promote the growth of healthy bacteria within the infant. So when it comes to breastfeeding, that's why it's advised to breastfeed up to 6 months when you have a baby. Also, the timing of weaning, so food introduction, this is really key when it comes to food allergy development in a child. Weaning before 4 months is not recommended at all. The immune system hasn't had the time to develop properly, and this might cause the child to be hypersensitive to those proteins. After 6 months, it's advised that food is introduced slowly, including the most allergenic proteins one at a time. You would probably think then, because I've spoken so much about gut bacteria, what about prebiotics and probiotics? How can they kind of influence food allergy development? There's actually quite weak evidence that we have at the moment suggesting that probiotics and prebiotics might help inhibit food allergy development, so it is kind of a growing body of research that we have going on at the moment. But we have had some research indicating that taking probiotics and also feeding your gut microbes with prebiotics might help alleviate some symptoms of food allergies. At the moment, there's no recommendations in consuming prebiotics and also taking probiotics in relation to food allergies. As we know, vitamin D has been linked to an improved immune system. It aids the immune functions in the body. And there has actually been a link between areas of low sunlight, so not getting that vitamin D that they need, with increased food allergy. So that might be another factor that comes into it as well. Furthermore, we also have the increase in pollution nowadays, which can be really irritating to someone who might be predisposed to allergies. And actually, exposure in your first year of life to increased pollution can actually increase the risk of food allergies. So there's air pollutants like ozone, nitrogen dioxide, also cigarette smoke. They can all be irritating and stimulate that IgE mediated response in the body. And also we need to consider the nature of the allergen, so the antigen, if you like, the protein that causes those issues, what form it's in, how strong it is, and also how it's been processed. Processing of foods can actually increase or decrease the allergenicity of foods. For example, peanuts that have been boiled are far more allergenic than peanuts that have been roasted. So it's something that we really need to consider. And what you might know is that you can actually grow out of food allergies. So your oral tolerance builds, but this really is dependent on how severe the allergy is initially. And if a child is believed to have outgrown their food allergy, then they will be referred to an allergy clinic where they have oral food challenges to determine whether or not they're still allergic. And that brings me quite nicely onto the next section. How do we test for food allergies? There's a couple different methods that we use. So once your GP suspects that you've got a food allergy, you will be referred to a specialist or an allergy clinic where they will do tests on you. And there's a couple different tests that you might have. The first one is a skin prick test, and basically what happens is drops of that food extract that you might suspect that you're allergic to will be dripped onto your arm, and then a little needle called a lancet is placed onto that area, just quickly into the skin. And what this does is it basically allows the protein and the immune cells to react together. So if you are allergic, what basically results in that kind of area will probably be itchiness and redness, and then it's assumed that you are allergic to that specific protein / food. You can also get a blood test, so that's basically your blood's taken and then they measure the certain IgE antibodies against those food extracts. And the last is oral food challenges, and this is known as the gold standard. So it's basically the most accurate method to determine whether or not someone is allergic to certain foods or not. And what happens in oral food challenges is the patient is given graded doses of that food, and then the challenge is stopped when a reaction occurs. As you can imagine, this needs to be in a really supervised and controlled manner because it can lead to really dangerous effects such as anaphylaxis. So this is mainly in hospital, in a clinical room where you have all those treatments around you. And lastly, let's just get onto the treatment and prevention of food allergies. There is no cure for food allergies. It's really about avoiding those certain foods and putting preventative measures in place to avoid you suffering from an allergic reaction. But what's really key is identifying them when you're younger, so you know kind of what to look out for. So prevention is key. When someone is weaning their baby at 6 months of age, it's really important to keep an eye out for those highly allergenic foods, so those big 8 and also those extra 6. And what's important during the time of weaning is to introduce those foods one at a time, give 3 days in between, and then go on to the next food. See if there's a reaction, keep a food diary for your baby, and just note if there's any adverse symptoms with the consumptions of those foods. By the age of 12 months, babies should be really weaned fully, and all those allergenic foods should be introduced by then. And also what's key is that if a baby suffers with eczema or, skin dermatitis, they might be more likely to suffer from food allergies. So it's just kind of taking the precautionary measures, noting down the symptoms and seeing if there's a link. As I said, the only main way that we can avoid having a food allergy reaction is to avoid those certain foods. And also it's all about education. So avoiding those foods, reading labels. When you go out to eat, tell the staff that you have a food allergy, have a look at the booklet. We have very strict laws in place now with allergen labeling and everything, because there has been so many deaths over improper labeling and basically misconduct. So it's a massive legal requirement to have those foods labeled properly. And it's really up to restaurants, catering companies, etc. to properly label, reduce contamination, so that these things don't happen. Nowadays, research is constantly evolving, and there has been more talks about desensitization therapies. When it applies to food allergies, we call this oral immunotherapy. A patient comes in and you basically give them graded doses of food over a prolonged period of time, and this is thought to promote desensitization. However, it's still kind of in its research stages, preliminary stages. It's definitely not an advised treatment at this moment in time, and although some studies show promise, it definitely needs more evidence to back it. When it comes to treating a reaction, if it's mild to moderate, antihistamines are given. They basically help to counteract the histamine in the body to alleviate those symptoms, so itching, redness. However, when it becomes more serious and anaphylaxis occurs, then emergency treatment is required. And it's more than likely that adrenaline will be administered in the form of an EpiPen, so just in the thigh, and that basically helps to counteract the histamine as well, allowing the person to breathe, opening those airways, and also contracting those capillaries so blood pressure comes back up. And in some cases, the EpiPen doesn't work, so another dose will be given. Ultimately, anaphylaxis can lead to death, so it's really important that they seek emergency help. Okay, so I think I've covered everything that I've wanted to. If I've maybe missed anything, feel free to comment below. Food allergies are a massive interest of mine, and I'm very excited to start working in them this week. And yeah, well, I hope you enjoyed this Tuesday Talks. I hope you learned a little bit, and I hope you found it interesting, and I shall see you next week. Bye.